two guests tonight are Feather Robinson on the left and Matthias Schmidt on the right. So I'll give them a minute to introduce themselves, and then we'll open up for discussion.
Okay. First of all, my background, the reason why I'm known as Feathers, that's my middle name, which is White Feather. And my father was Blackfeet, and my mother came from Liverpool. So I can do all of the Native American ceremonies to the Beatletons. And you guys know who the Beatles are, most of you that are here. And so my background is years and years of teaching, but archaeoastronomy is my passion. And to do a brief commercial, I will do my 10-week archaeoastronomy class for ICL starting in September. And Rob brought on some material there. So that's what I'll be teaching. And even before I get into it, first thing I have to tell people is what's archaeoastronomy? Because first of all, you can't say it. Well, archaeoastronomy combines archaeology with astronomy. And it's really cool. It's the passion. It brings to life all of the ancient ones and what they thought of the sky. And since we're going to be talking about the sky, it's going to be very, very important to know about what the indigenous people think about the sky. And so there are some circles that don't call it archaeoastronomy. They call it cultural astronomy. So different cultures tell different stories, beginning in the past and in the future. And the sky is alive. It's full of stories and navigation, and it isn't just stars. And one of my favorite quotes is from the Aborigines, where they say the stars are the ancestors, the stars are the campfires of the ancestors. And so that I really liked. And the thing that frustrates me, especially with archaeoastronomy, when you talk about anytime they find anything wonderfully new discovery, it's got to be the ancient aliens, right? In fact, of course, the first question I get is, do you believe in ancient aliens? And I always have to say, of course I do. I've dated a few. And so I want to give the ancient ones the credit for being as smart as what they are and exploring on all of the options we have with the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all there is to know about astronomy. And so you can do next. You want to do next?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Matthias. I'm the Dark Skies coordinator at Cedar Breaks National Monument. It's an international dark sky park. I also own a stargazing business, and I finished my master's in astronomy last year. In December, I also became an American citizen, and thank you. I had to pass a test and an interview and a written test and then an oral test. And I love dark skies, and we have an annual eclipse coming up in October this year, and then total eclipse next year. And we'll talk about that tonight, as well as how important dark skies are to Utah. It's not the only thing that connects us, but all the matter that we see here, the stuff that we made of, comes from a supernova, from a star that exploded more than 5 billion years ago, 25 times more massive than the sun. And massive stars, they form all the heavy elements in our universe, so we're all connected through the stardust, whether you want it or not. And I'm looking forward to being here. Thank you very much, Rika, for inviting me. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit from me, and I always learn very much from the audience and your questions.
Well, thank you both for being here tonight. I'm excited to hear more about both the Dark Sky initiatives and the upcoming solar eclipse. I think it was Carl Sagan that mentioned how amazing it was that we're essentially the universe being able to observe itself. Right? So because we're stardust, it was the opportunity for the universe to create us that then can observe the universe. And so I think that's a pretty neat way of describing that. So, does anyone want to start with any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns about dark sky solar eclipse? Yeah. So, can you mention the blue moon and the wolf moon and where those names come from and what they represent?
I knew you were going to ask that question, Chris. Thank you very much. She's in the astronomy group in St. George that I'm a member of. So tonight we have a full moon. All of you guys know what a full moon is, right? So when the moon rises opposite the sun in the sky, it's called opposition. When the moon, the earth, and the sun are lined up like that, whether it's a full moon or a new moon, it's called syzygy, S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y. That's 25 points in Scrabble. If you learn one thing from tonight's talk, that with letters like S, Y, and Z, and G, you can win any Scrabble match. So the Earth orbits the sun on an ellipsis, and the moon orbits the Earth on an ellipsis. So sometimes the moon is a little closer, sometimes a little further away. So tonight we have not only a full moon, but also a supermoon when the moon is a little bit closer to the Earth on its closest position in its elliptical orbit. It's called perigee. Peri is Latin for closest point. So the moon is closest on its orbit to Earth. So the moon appears to be brighter. The tides are a little bit stronger. It's not really perceivable for the human eye. You really have to take a picture with your camera and then compare it to the normal moon. There's the opposite is a micromoon, when the moon is furthest on its path around the Earth. They really have no astronomical bearing. A blue moon from folklore is that it's the second full moon in a month. So tonight is August 31st. They're very rare. We had a full moon on August 1st. You might have heard the term once in a blue moon. So my parents tell me sometimes, you call us once in a blue moon. That's not a term of endearment. It means that I should call more often. So once in a blue moon is very rare. And it's really folklore. The moon does not change colors like that. It doesn't appear to be blue. The only time the moon appears to be red is during a total lunar eclipse. But tonight we'll learn a little bit more about solar eclipses. So none of them are really astronomical terms, but we'll take whatever we can to get people excited about the night sky. And the moon last night already looked stunning and amazing. So if you have time tonight, just look up when it gets twilight. You'll see the moon rise from an easterly direction and really full. If you miss tonight, tomorrow morning when you get up and you go on your early morning walk, you walk your dog or whatever you do, just look towards the west. You will see the full moon setting because the full moon will still be opposite the sun in the sky. So tonight's a great time to go moon gazing or moon bathing.
From a Native American point of view, and each tribal group would have a different name for the moon. But we say there are 13 moons. And some like to say will have different names because of the tribe issue. But it actually comes from, since the United States is known as Turtle Island, if you know a turtle is divided into 13 sections. And those are the 13 sections for the moons. And so here we tied Earth and the moon together. And following the moon told them when to harvest, when to plant, when to move. And there are a lot of locations like the old Cahokia along the Mississippi River that was all set up with lunar and about moon. And so the moon is very important to us too. And so we have lots and lots of different stories for that.
And I want to add to that because I talked about that with a friend of mine about the turtles. They have, I think, 30 little around the circle.
Yes.
So there's 30, which It's 29 and a half days from new moon to new moon, and then they have 13 other plates around, so you have 13 full moons in a solar year. And we were wondering why that is. If some force in the universe actually just picked the turtles to look like that, or whether people actually recognize that some turtles have the exact amount of tiles on their back that represent the days from the new moon to the new moon phase and the number of months or full moons in a year. So here's a little bit of something to think about, evolutionary. People that actually recognize this connection, they saw that some turtles have these exact amount of tiles and they left them alive. And the other ones, they made into turtle soup. And I'm giving you this little folklore story because in the Japanese folklore, there is a crab called the samurai crab. And when you look at the back of the crab, it actually looks like the face of a samurai. Okay? And none of the other crabs look like that. So why do you think that is? So people, fishermen, that had this connection to this story about this samurai and the samurai crab, what did they do? They thought it's divine, so they found the samurai crab, they threw it back in the water, and the other ones they ate. So the samurai crabs, they kept whatever they do, procreating with each other, multiplying, and the other ones were just removed from the total pool of crabs. So correlation is not causation.
So we, going back to native, we believe on Earth as it is in the sky. And we have strong beliefs that when we do ceremonies down here, they're also being done at the same time in the sky. And that's why we look at the sky differently, and we have such different stories. A good example of that, everybody kind of knows the Big Dipper. Well, for our story, that's the stretcher. When somebody passes on, their soul or their spirit goes into the dipper. And the long handle, you have 3 people that are meant to guide it along the Milky Way. So for us, the Big Dipper is the stretcher to take us on the blue path. So we're very closely tied with the sky and the earth. We don't really separate them. Even a teepee, we're teepee people. The teepee's down on the earth, but the stars going up there reach to the sky. And so we're very closely tied to the sky, more than people would think we'd be. We saw it for one thing.
I was in Australia for the last total solar eclipse, and in Western Australia there was this location where the Apollo astronauts trained geology for their lunar mission. And there was an Aboriginal elder that saw the astronauts train, and he asked them, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "We're training to go to the moon." And they pointed towards the moon, and he asked them, "You going up there?" And they said yes. And he asked them, "Do you mind relaying a message to our moon god that we pray to?" And they said, "No, not at all." So the elder basically gave them this little sentence that they memorized. And they came back to Houston, and they asked one of the people that were able to translate this Aboriginal speech. And the interpreter started laughing, and they asked him, "What did he ask us to relay?" And he said, "Don't believe any word these guys are saying. They're just here to steal your land."
There's actually another story to kind of tie into that. When they were taking the Mars rover up there, and the Navajo or the Dene, one of the elders, and native humor is so funny but so silent. And so they're saying, "Well, don't you want to send a message up to Mars?" And the elder writes out something in his native tongue. And so the other natives are very stoic. They weren't laughing, even though they knew what the note said. So finally, when they arrived in Mars, they left the note there and then come back later. And they asked the elder, "What did the note say?" And finally, his grandson started giggling, and it says, "Beware, the white man will steal your land." So that's kind of the native story too.
I'm going to ask you guys to accelerate the discussion. So Utah is known for its dark skies. Are you guys aware of that? Okay. How many dark sky parks, communities do you think we have in Utah? I'm going to give you a range. Okay. Who thinks it's more than 1? Good. Who thinks it's more than 5? Who thinks it's more than 10? Who thinks it's more than 15? Who thinks it's more than 20? Okay, we have actually 20 dark sky parks, communities here in Utah. 3 dark sky communities, we have various state parks and national parks that are accredited by the Dark Sky organization for their preservation of this amazing natural asset that we have, which are dark skies. How many of you guys have seen the Milky Way in the last month? Okay, good. Well, what about the other guys? No? So like a quarter bands. Go to Zion National Park, come up to Cedar Breaks, doing one of our night sky programs. Go to Bryce Canyon, go to Moab, go to Arches. There are plenty of locations here where we can experience the Milky Way in its glory during the summer. And I believe that we have this connection to nature. And Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes, the comic. So they look up at the night sky and the beauty of the Milky Way, and they look at each other and say, if people would see more of the stars in the night sky, maybe we'd have a different attitude towards each other and how we treat each other. So it's not just a natural asset, but it's also a spiritual asset. How much wonder we have on this planet and in this solar system. And, I'm a dark sky advocate, not because I love the universe, but it's good for business, right? That's why I became a citizen. It's good for business. But there's one thing that can parallel natural resource, which is artificial light, from the surrounding areas. And at Cedar Breaks, we just did a measurement of the artificial brightness in the surrounding area. And between 2006 and 2023, the artificial brightness has increased by 63%. Okay, so we still have near pristine skies, but every year over the last 10 years, it has gotten brighter and brighter. And when we look up in the sky, even in St. George, we see a lot more stars than I used to see in New York City, where I saw more stars on Broadway than in the sky. But there are a few simple things that we can do to curb this artificial sky brightness, which we call light pollution. And I love Utah. It's a beautiful place to live. I'm not the only one that thinks that, right? Because over the last 20 years, people have flocked to Utah. Nature is awesome, people are awesome, and it has a really high quality of living. And but we live here, right? So people come and people go, which is great for the economy. But there's natural resources that we have to just think about what little things we can do to help maintain these dark skies. And I'm not against growth, I'm for growth, but I think if we have some mindful growth where we can use proper light shielding for lights, where we can turn off the outdoor lights when we don't need it, where we have proper light shielding on street lights, all of this will help tremendously for us to continue to enjoy the dark skies.
Can you explain or talk a little bit about how a place is designated a dark sky, and how, for example, Ivins has a dark sky initiative, and I believe Snow Canyon might be a dark sky park. Is that correct?
I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
Maybe.
But how do other communities like St. George affect a place like Ivins that might be looking to establish a dark sky program where they can't tell St. George, hey, turn out your lights, right? So how do they set a threshold, or how do they set a limit of what a dark sky is, and how do you deal with that light pollution?
So Springdale, outside of Zion, just became a dark sky community on July 20th. And they have been working on this for about 10 years, which means this process is an ultra-marathon, not just a marathon. And it has a lot to do with educating your community on the benefits of using the right intensity of light and the right color of light, and that you shield light properly. It has tremendous health benefits. If you have ever trouble sleeping, maybe it's because there's some big street light that's shining into your bedroom, and you wonder why that is. And that's probably because the street light isn't properly shielded. And if you shield a street light, it's directed downwards to where it's needed. And you need a light bulb that's not as strong, which saves the community money. And I have yet to meet a person that doesn't like to save money. So communities have to show that they come up with a light management plan where they incorporate these simple technological changes to your outdoor lighting, and that you provide educational programs to the public. This would be one of them, so you can already check that one off. And those are really the two big things. For a community like Springdale with 800 people living there, even though it's only 800 people, it took a while for them to get their application to be accepted by the Dark Sky organization. For communities, the threshold for having dark skies to see the Milky Way is not as high as, for example, for a dark sky park, for a national park like Cedar Breaks or Zion. But the benefit of the dark sky of the national parks is that we have authority over what kind of lights we put up in our park. You know, in Cedar Breaks, we have 50 lights, and I can tell the superintendent if we want to maintain our dark sky designation, we just have to switch out a few light bulbs. Next year, we'll have our new visitor center finished, and we'll have proper lights there. So that's the benefit of having control over the lights in your area for which you're responsible. For a community like Ivins, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But don't underestimate when people work together to change a few things. And it takes education, and it takes a little bit of willpower. But I believe that once we realize how amazing dark skies are, what the benefits are not just for us, but also wildlife and plant life, I think it might be a little easier to get to the threshold.
And Jared, just a quick follow-up. As far as indigenous communities go, because the night sky is so important to them, how do they manage when they have light pollution from nearby communities kind of infiltrating that?
And it's mostly about talking about it, and it's mostly about education and convincing them why it's important. And going back to the native cultures, since the sky is our stories and is so important to us, from navigation to to just the Blackfeet, the Planks tribe had big wheels on the ground, like Bigfoot medicine wheel, and it had 27 spokes to it, and they call it a medicine wheel, but it's an observatory. That's where we learned how to navigate with the stars. And it goes back to even the Polynesians, some 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, when they wandered from island to island. They once again, like a spoke in a wheel, they would look at the stars in one section in that wheel, And that's the stars that they would follow to get where they were going and follow to get back again. So we used it for navigation, and we use it for so many things that it's a part of our culture. And it's a shame that now we can't see our stories anymore. The basic what it is, but I think it's education. People got to be motivated on why it's important, and I don't know why so many people are frightened of the dark. I mean, that's one thing we grew up with. It was kind of cool to be dark, and just to show you one, let me give you 2 examples of how it's really cool. But a recent book that just came out just last year, they found petroglyphs on the ground, and in the UK area, over in the the British Isles and everything, and they called it cups and saucers. Okay, they're on the ground. Okay, so in the middle was a big deep thing that you could actually put a cup in it. Okay, and then they had rings around it. Now these go back to the Neolithic period of time, 5,000 years ago. Okay, so once again, an astronomer's looking at it thinking, I think it has something to do with the stars. So they found out the cups was the actual star. And in this book, they show a star chart and how they're tying it to the stars. But then also the rings around it, this is 5,000 years ago, the rings around it tied into how bright that star was. So if it had 4 rings around it, it's really bright. 8 rings around it, it's really bright. No rings around it, it's not bright at all. And they found that some of those stars that weren't bright at all could no longer even be seen with the naked eye. So here, 5,000 years ago, are these things that are on the ground telling them all about the stars. And then a really cool, exciting thing about dating even some of the sites in petroglyphs is using the stars for that. Because I tell people the only thing I've been dating lately is petroglyphs. But anyway, so in the dating of this, they found out the stars have a natural precession. Okay, some say 25,000 years, some say 26,000 years. The North Star would be the South Star. Okay, and John Eddy, who was a great astronomer in the 70s, said he did it. He said, okay, he found out that the stars move about every 72 years, about 1 degree. And you think, okay, what do I do with that piece of information? Well, they come out with a program called Starry Night. The astronomers use it, the advanced, the intermediate, and the beginning, and they can move the stars back. They can move the sky back. So if you're standing in a rock alignment and you think, I wonder when they make that rock alignment, okay? They move the stars back, and they found out that that alignment lines up 3,000 years ago. So the sky goes away, the story goes away, even the dating in archaeology goes away. So we're able to date these things, and then internally, John Eddy also did some work with the Lakota Sioux, and he found out that they had to have not only their ceremonies like in the summer where they did the Sundance, it only had to be done in the summer, but it had to be done at the Devil's Tower because of where the constellation was. And so John Eddy did this dating thing and found out, oh, that ceremony started about 2,000 years ago. So we keep coming up with these really, really old dates using stars and beginning to understand what the stars are all about. And the stories, we just have story after story about what the stars are. And the stories are important because of the lessons that they teach, but also it teaches you how important the sky is. It's not just, okay, it's dark, we gotta turn lights on. It's way beyond that.
But I want to thank Rico for actually putting the night sky up.
Yeah, this wasn't it.
These little light bulbs. It's not scientifically accurate, but that's, it's artistic, right? And
Thanks, Trevor.
The Southern Paiute band actually became the first dark sky nation in this planet just a few years ago. They're in Pipe Spring, and they made efforts to manage the artificial light that they have on the reservation. So communities are able to educate the community members and pull together to make these things happen. So, thank you very much that the tribal nations continue to maintain the connection to this guy, because, think about you've ever seen pictures of the East Islands with these gigantic stone faces, the Rapa Nui? The island used to be full with trees, and now there are no trees left because they have deforested, they've cut their trees. And at what point do you think, whether it was 30% gone or 50% gone or 80% gone, when do you think somebody said, maybe we should think about not cutting any more trees, or cut them at a sustainable rate so that the forest can recover? And it's really similar to the growth that we have in urban centers. What's another neighborhood with another 100 houses? It's not going to affect the quality of the night sky that much. And people say, yeah, you're right. And then all of a sudden, 50 years later, you see the moon and 10 of the brightest stars, and everything else is gone. And you don't have anybody left that says, remember 50 years ago when we could see 500 stars, or when we could see the Milky Way? So, I love being a human being. I love all my fellow Homo sapiens. And, when do we stop? When do we ask ourselves and say, enough is enough? We can do little things to preserve the quality of life for us and for the next generation. And I have to do my part too, right? I'm not here to say, it's everybody else and not me. It's all of us together.
Talked about the communities that are looking at becoming dark sky designated. Is there any movement on a city or county or a larger, bigger level to work with builders in terms of regulations or requirements for lighting? We were surrounded by national parks, and we have cities that are almost negated in some of that dark sky environment.
It's a good question. There are recommendations on the dark sky website. There are approved lights that you can buy at Home Depot and at Lowe's. I'm not making advertisement for them, but the biggest part is for the voters in the community, to be aware of this issue and ask your elected officials, what are you doing to preserve this? And if a whole neighborhood says, we want to do something about this, and we want to install proper outside lights, and it is possible, and then all of a sudden, your surrounding neighbors are wondering, why is it so dark here, but so friendly, right? This is less light doesn't mean less safe, and more light doesn't mean safer. It's a lot. Again, this is education, and to show people what can actually happen when you have really bright lights. You have really dark shadow lines, and some of the people in my community, they have incredible big outdoor lights, and I wonder, okay, we know you have the biggest house on the block, and do you want to advertise to, let's call them burglars? I have the biggest house on the block. Maybe you want to come here, or if I would have the biggest house on the block, I would turn off all the lights so that nobody can see my home. So I'm saying this half jokingly. But there are things that we can do on our own, and then there are things that we can do when we ask our community officials and encourage them, to suggest to the power company that installs the outdoor lights to use proper light shielding. And it might take a year, it might take 2 years. Once the light bulbs are out, they switch out to new light bulbs and suggest maybe we should switch to a little warmer color. And all of a sudden, after this will take time. After 2-3 years, you walk around your neighborhood and you think, this is actually lovely. So it will take time, but there are approaches, and happy to talk more about this at a different venue. to help communities how to approach a plan to become more dark sky sensitive and then become dark sky community. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for any stronger initiatives, like regulation, requirements,
Yes.
you know, working with the building community, and I know that's not
All these things, I wanted to avoid the word regulation. Okay, I wanted to avoid the term ordinance. I wanted to use the term, light management plan. That sounds a little less intrusive because I totally understand it, right? I live here, and when I hear the term regulation, I'm like, regulate what? Who's gonna tell me what to do on my property? Yes. So, but again, this is education, right? There are benefits to regulation. Imagine we wouldn't have had regulation to take out some of the chemicals in our gasoline from 100 years ago. We'd all be sitting here with cancer. Okay. So some of the elements in the gasoline that people put in their cars, 100 years ago, would really help the gasoline. But, we took out the lead and our cars are still running and they're more efficient than they've ever been. So in Germany, where I grew up, in the 80s, we had what was called acid rain, because the big factories, when they blew their smoke up through the smokestack in the sky, there was acid in the smoke, and then when it rained down as acid rain. And it started to destroy the Black Forest, which is where I grew up. And then the local community said, what are you doing? Right? Okay, we have to do something about the effects of these activities. So we had to install proper filters for the smokestacks. Okay, and the Black Forest has recovered. Remember the ozone layer from 40 years ago? We were pulling the CFC into the air from our gas canisters, and the ozone layer became bigger and bigger. And then what happened? People were like, let's stop. There's simple things we can do about this. We just take the CFC out of the gas canisters. People are still using hairspray cans and other cans, but all of a sudden the ozone layer is recovering, which is helping to save people from skin cancer. So there's lots of things that we can do when we realize, okay, what are the consequences of our actions?
Well, and I think it always begins with awareness and begins with groups like this and building force to make change. And it will come eventually if we gather enough. And sometimes we take things for granted, because I've been down in this area before. This area was like a dirt hill when I came here, and Soul Canyon Parkway was a dirt road when I came here. And so it's changing and it's growing, and we also need to change our attitude. But what really opened my first big change on dark sky, I grew up with dark sky, but when I came here, we were doing a ceremony with a family from Florida, born and raised in Florida. And when we crawled out of the sweat lodge at midnight and we looked up at the sky, it was the most beautiful Milky Way I'd ever seen in my life. And these people from Florida were freaking out because they had never, ever, ever seen the Milky Way. Because Florida's got lights everywhere, but also clouds. And so we have clear sky, we have dark skies, and it helps everybody, but it starts with awareness and education. And but I'd hate to think in the future, and I now have great grandkids, but I hate to think in the future my great grandkids are not going to be able to see the Milky Way anymore if we don't do something today.
When I came out for the first time to Cedar Breaks, after I drove across the country from the East Coast, I went up there.
Yeah.
I looked at the sky and I went, wow,
Mm.
I have never seen this many stars. I couldn't recognize any constellations. And then I thought, they knew I was coming. They're just turning on the lights. This is a holographic artificial intelligence technology. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna come the next night again. So I went the next night again, and it was still there. And then I figured, the National Park Service probably doesn't have the funds to just create an artificial night sky, so it's probably real.
Well, and there's even little things that can be started with, like, street lights that go down and not up. I mean, so there's a list of little simple things that you can start with to make sure that we just have to start somewhere, even if it's baby steps. We need to start somewhere and eventually build on it, and every step we take will make a difference for the future.
I've got a question. I was on a field trip a couple years ago at Horseshoe Bend in, on the Colorado River. And we stopped at a wall that had a number of petroglyphs. And I was really shocked to find that the ancestral Native Americans that were there that created those had such a strong grasp on Greek mythology, because the Cassiopeia constellation was there. Obviously not, but I was actually wondering whether if you could relay one of your favorite constellation stories from Native peoples.
Well, first of all, one of my favorite petroglyphs, and we see this in Little Black Mountain. We've got a lot of archaeoastronomy sites here. It is the Venus star that actually comes up from Mesoamerica. So it came up from the Mayan, but it's a cross and then it's outlined. But the Venus star's everywhere. And these people looked up, you go down to Valley of Fire, and it's there. You go to Little Black Mountain, it's everywhere. And so the constellations have stories, but they're different stories. It's like when you look at the Orion Belt, when you see the 3 stars in the Orion Belt, okay, the Lakotas have the story that that's the wrist of a chief that got really selfish, so they cut his hand off. So some of us like, okay, that's kind of a weird story. But those stories are alive. But what I like, when I spent my time with the Hopi people, if you take a map, and this is so cool, if you take a map and you connect the dot with some of the major Hopi villages, it will outline Orion, the Orion constellation, on the ground with the villages. And I've been into their version of a sweat lodge where the hole at the top lines up with the Orion stars, the 3 belts of the stars. And so we have constellations, the great astronomers. I mean, some people think that astronomy started with Galileo in 1608, but we go back so much further than that. The paintings they found in France and Spain have now been tied to constellations, and those they thought were 17,000 years old, and now they're pushing the date back to 50,000 years old, which puts it the place of the time into the Neanderthal time period. These beautiful cave paintings. And the astronomers coming up with the Mayan civilization, Chaco, Cahokia, the Mayans were equal to kings and queens. The astronomers, you can't get much higher on that pyramid than if you were an astronomer. And so they were so tied to astronomy. It goes back to, you take the Maya long calendar that was invented in 3000 BC. So we go much further back in studying the stars. And it's exciting to see and I did a class on interpretive work for the petroglyphs. And so I do some of that, storytelling with that kind of work with the petroglyphs, but it's all there, And archaeoastronomers, when I studied with an astronomer in Montana, she's saying archaeologists look down and astronomers look up. But archaeoastronomers have to look down and up. And it's amazing. I think it was Yogi Berra that said, it's amazing what you see when you look. And so it's all out there. But if we're not careful about it, we can't see those stories anymore. And that would be so sad. I've worked with the Paiutes, the Southern Paiutes there. I bet probably been thick of it, might have been part of that. But they're so tied to the stars, and it does give you a different feeling when you're sitting on the top of the mountain, looking up in the cosmos and looking up into the stars. You realize how little you are and how big you are. And we don't want to get rid of that feeling. So,
So, question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what can we do as individuals?
what was the question?
What can we do? What can we do as just individuals? You were talking about the light bulbs and turning off lights that you have outside that are unnecessary. What else? What else is there that we can do?
You can take Heather's class about archaeoastronomy astronomy to learn about the stars, because she's going to tell you you have to look up. And when you have to look up, you will see how many stars there are from your location. If you don't see that many, you will probably, or hopefully, come to Cedar Breaks or Zion, and then you'll see a lot more stars. And you wonder, how come it's so bright where I live? How come it's so dark here? And then, right, I think the trick is for people to make this their own, right? Not to tell people what to do, but people are like, what can I do here on my own to make it just to replicate what we have up there? Because the stars are there no matter what. It's just the artificial light pollution that we have that will wash out everything else. So there are these simple things that you can do, and I think to be inspired by the night sky, that will give you the proper motivation, versus somebody's telling you, you should switch out this light bulb. But when you I want to do this for myself, right? We're individuals, but we're also part of the community. It's like a domino effect. So it's an excellent question. Come to Heather's class, come to our astronomy festival, and then learn about the night sky and how passionate people are about astronomy and science and culture and archaeoastronomy, and the wonderful stories that people that have been studying the sky for thousands of years can share with you.
Here's a question over there.
I'm going to ask a really quick question. Can you talk about the astronomy festival that you just held? When, where, and how do we find out about them?
Sure, I can. It's September 15 through 17. We have about 20 events in the St. George area, in Cedar Breaks and Zion. The Utah Tech Astronomy Club has events, the St. George Astronomy Group. It's on the Cedar Breaks website. I have a little poster here so you can scan the QR code, and that will get you to the schedule. And then you can share it with your friends and say, let's go together. And we have several nights. We have a wonderful speaker from NASA that will come. She will talk about the sun. She's one of the most renowned heliophysicists in the world. She has been studying the sun for 40, 50 years. She has been involved in various NASA solar observing missions. And it's a delight to have somebody like that from NASA here. So September 15th to 17th is the Southwest Astronomy Festival.
I would take, because of my background, I would take less of an educational in mind saying everybody needs to be educated, and more of a kind of a spiritual aspect is take somebody outside in the darkness and make them fall in love with the stars. And then at that point, they're going to want to make a change. Oh, I just got chicken skin with that one. But make them fall in love with the night sky. Make them see how wonderful it is. Get them emotionally attached to it, and then little by little, make the lights go down. They don't need to go up. They can go down. Those things like that. So, Rob, you had a question?
I have a question and a comment. Maybe you guys can elaborate on this, but essentially we operate on circadian rhythms. These circadian rhythms have been disrupted significantly when we are exposed to light constantly. Our fellow animals, which do we care whether they're all confused and disrupted and they can't reproduce? Yeah, because we need them in our lives. There's a lot of research, particularly coming out of Japan, that the further we are removed from nature, the greater we suffer from stress, from inflammation, from blood pressure, and and the only way we can, one of the best ways we can do this is get close to nature again. The animals are getting confused and they're not out in the daytime because it's light at nighttime. And so that is causing another separation. Separating us from nature, including the stars, damages our mental health and our physical health. And we're just becoming aware of it. So if you didn't care about anything else but your own health, that's still a big reason to be concerned about the night sky.
That's very well said. And there was a time, and I think it was the beginning of the year, like March or so, when it was really cloudy, and I didn't see the stars for a week. And what did I do? I went to my phone and I checked out Instagram, and I went down a black hole. No pun intended. And I checked out all the ex-girlfriends that I was used to date, and one of them actually published a song which was called Starboy, and I wondered, that's interesting. And then I listened to the song that she wrote, and I can either confirm or deny that this is about me, but I do have hazel eyes. So it's not good if you go down, that path when you don't see the sky. So,
And one of my favorite quotes, because kind of being raised in two different worlds, people are always asking what I am. And I'm always telling them, well, I'm a possibilian. Because there's so many possibilities out there. Well, one of my favorite quotes is by Marcel Provost. He was a French novelist in the late 1700s. And it was, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And so we have to look at everything differently. I mean, sometimes we have this little window of perception, and we need to make that window bigger, and we need to tell people that this, in the long run, like Rob was saying, it benefits us physically, down to our soul, spiritually, whatever word you want to attach to it. But we are stars. We are part of the stars. And we can't keep hiding our stories because they're up there.
So let's take a few minutes to talk about the closest star, which will disappear in a few weeks. I think, Feather, if you can just maybe mention a little bit about the importance of solar eclipses or any historical context of solar eclipses for the native communities. And then, Matthias, if you could then talk about the upcoming eclipse on October 14 and what it means and the best way to view that.
Well, some of the most powerful astronomers, especially in Chaco, because we've got more information on them, could predict, these eclipses. It wasn't something that was just came along in what we call European modern age. And it was a time more for ceremony than anything else. And we do have sites that show the solstices, the summer, the winter, the equinoxes, the cross quarters that are all there. And for us, which might surprise you, our most important time of the year would be winter solstice or an eclipse, because we had to have ceremonies to sing things back again. Because the sun is the furthest away from winter solstice, and so we have to sing it back again. And you white folks out there are really lucky that we're singing it back again. And the same with the eclipse. That's a very, very powerful time of the year. It wasn't a scary time of the year, but it was a very, very powerful time of the year. And it wasn't about, I get a little frustrated where they say, well, natives just, need to know when to plant corn. And I kept saying, okay, for some of you are old enough, you may still actually have a wall calendar, okay? And to me, it's like having a wall calendar that's only going to tell you when to buy plants at Lowe's, okay? It wasn't about planting corn, okay? And it wasn't just about ceremony. It was much deeper than that because of all of the star stories that are out there. And so, learning to look up and then just appreciating what you see when you look up.
Thank you, and I admit I'm an eclipsophile. I saw my first total solar eclipse August 21st, 2017 in Oregon. And my life changed after that. I got something happened to me inside spiritually, and I thought this was amazing. Where the sun was, all of a sudden there was just the blackness. You could see the sun's tenuous atmosphere, which is called the corona. You could see the stars and the planets appear around it, and this lasted for about 2 minutes. And we know what the science is behind it and why that happens, but our brain still cannot comprehend what is happening up there. There was a teenage girl next to me, and she was jumping up and down and dancing and saying, "This is happening, this is happening." And I cry. Okay, I now grew up in Germany, men are not supposed to cry, but I do cry every single time I see a total solar eclipse. So it is an emotional experience for some of us, not for all of us. And so October 14th, we will have an annular solar eclipse going through the area. Annulus is Latin for ring light. The moon, the new moon, will not cover the sun completely. So that will be the ring of fire left over, and which is the sun. And this happens October 14th in the morning from 9 to 12. So here in St. George, we're a little south of it's called the path of annularity. And if you want to see the disk of the moon centered exactly in the disk of the sun, you have to drive maybe 20, 30 miles north. And then you're in the path of annularity. For a total solar eclipse, it's called the path of totality. During an annular solar eclipse, the moon will not cover the sun completely, so it's essential that you wear eclipse glasses for the whole time. And the Park Service will sell them in Zion, and they're about $2. You can use them to look at the sun safely. I do not recommend welder's glasses. Some people say they work. I have never tried this experimentally. The eclipse glasses are inexpensive enough, and you can use them again next year. So you will have 2 chances to use them, not just one. And these annular or total eclipses, they provide great backdrops for amazing photography. Again, when you use your camera to take pictures of these phases of the eclipse, you need to put a filter on the front of your camera lens. If you observe it with a telescope, you need to put a filter in front of the telescope lens. Otherwise, you will damage your equipment, and at worst, you will damage your eyes. You can also use projection. One of the best things that happens during a partial phase of an eclipse is you see a crescent shape of the eclipse between the shadows of the leaves of the trees. You can use what is it called, a colander, this thing where you see your pasta through and project the crescent shape of the eclipse on the ground. The great thing for us here in Utah is, in October, it is usually clear. October is one of the best months for stargazing. And so that, shouldn't be an issue. There are plenty of people that try to predict the best path, the best location to observe an annular or total solar eclipse. And the satellite and the historical weather for the last 20 years, for October 14th, has shown 16 days of clear skies. So chances are really good. There will be plenty of events in the surrounding area. Bryce Canyon is in the path of annularity. They put on great night sky programs, and they will put on a great program for the annular eclipse. So again, you can look online. You can ask us at the St. George Astronomy Group, or you can email us at Cedar Breaks or Zion. We'd be happy to help you find a location for you or where public events are. So that's the annular eclipse for this year. Next year, April 8th, we will have a total solar eclipse where the sun will be covered by the moon completely, and you will see the corona of the sun. The path of totality will go through Mexico and then Texas. Texas is closest for us. For this one, you want to be in the path of totality, which is around 50 to 70 miles wide. The weather forecast for early April for Texas isn't great, but it's still better compared to the Northeast, for example, Maine or so, where in April it's usually cloudy all the time. If you don't have anything to do, if you have friends or relatives in Texas, tell them you're going to visit them April 8th. Don't tell them why, otherwise they might increase the prices on you for you to stay there. I traveled to all over the world for total solar eclipses. So in 2017 I was in Oregon, 2019 I went to Argentina, 2021 I went to Antarctica, which was cloudy, but I did see 1 million penguins who helped make up for that. And in April this year I was in Australia, and in the morning of the eclipse we drove in a bus like an hour north to be in the path of totality. It was fantastic, and we came back to our campsite, and there was a somebody that came up to me and asked, "How was it?" And I said, "It was amazing." And I asked him, "How was it for you?" And he said, "No, it was good. We saw 99% totality." And I wanted to cry. I travel halfway around the world to see a total eclipse. I flew across the Pacific. For 15 hours, I saw nothing but water. And this man with his family didn't drive another 20 miles to be in the path of totality. But, he just didn't know. People ask, what's the big deal? 99% coverage or 100% coverage? It might as well be 1,000%. Has anybody been to the Grand Canyon? What did you think when you went to the Grand Canyon? Did any of the pictures that you saw give any justice to the grandeur of the Grand Canyon? It's the same thing with a total eclipse. 99%, 100% is, just 1%, but it could well be having seen a picture of the Grand Canyon or actually having been to the Grand Canyon. So, 2 eclipses coming up, 1 annular, 1 total. You can use the annular eclipse as a training run, as a practice run, and then, go all out next year in April for the total eclipse.
And if you don't already have reservations in Bluff, Landing, Moab, Boulder, Escalante, where the eclipse will go through, it's too late. Or you'll pay thousands of dollars for one night because they know what's coming their way. So I think we're about out of time. We have one more comment. I do want to mention that if you're interested in Feather's ICL class or any of the other community learning courses, we have some brochures up here.
Thank you. I was going to say, you may have heard in school, we used to have planispheres, that kind of circle that people could look up. Well, now you can go on your iPhone and look at apps like Sky Portal or some other ones, and just look up in the sky and it'll tell you what's there. So you can learn the sky just on your own, wherever you go into the dark sky. And also I wanted to mention that part of the St. George Astronomy Group, we were able to get telescopes to the local libraries, and you can check them out like a book. There's usually a long line, but if you have people coming in or whatever, if you want to take them on a trip with you or something, they have instructions. People can show you how to work them. And the other thing is, the St. George Astronomy Group, we also have night skies where we go out and observe at down different places around St. George, and you're welcome to join us. They'll set up the telescopes. You can work for free, ask questions. So a lot of resources.
Thanks, Chris.
Just a little footnote. Cathedral Gorge, everybody know where Cathedral Gorge is there. They have platforms where you can set up your telescopes. And it's the most incredible dark sky. It's 90 miles from St. George. which means Rob can do it in half an hour. He's driving. But, and we have petroglyphs out there that, especially in Chaco Canyon, where the great astronomers were that document the eclipse and the big crowd of supernova that occurred in 1054. So, you know, they took time to document it. So,
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank Trevor and Cafe Elevato again for letting us host our event here. And thank you, Feather and Matthias, for an excellent discussion and great information. Thank you.
Okay.